G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff, Ukraine War Update for the 2nd of August 2025. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cade, Power Games, Into the Earlsbound, and The Erotic Tales from the Empire Part 1, available now on Amazon. All my links are in the link tree. And thank you to all those who support the channel, and I invite you to support the channel by buying my books, buying my merch, or joining my Patreon. Now, Putin can say that he's not going to be persuaded, but we all know he is calculating a way out of this war. We know he wants to achieve a lasting legacy that will put Russia on a reasonable path. He definitely wants to avoid the mistakes of the past. He's made that quite clear. I think he's been very consistent. What I find problematic is that he cannot deal with the hardliners and the lunatics. All power is an illusion, whether it's a billionaire, millionaire, or a politician. It is all an illusion. It's all transitory. And Trump has the levers of power, and Putin has fallen into China's trap. Debt diplomacy. Russia was building something, and China stole it. Okay, China's hijacked BRICS for itself. China has fundamentally undermined Russia's position many times. So has India and Brazil, working with China. You think China and India are enemies, don't. But India is trying to dominate. And their special relationship with Russia, well, they want to use that, don't they, again, as leverage. They want to steal the tech industry from China and Russia and turn them into vassal states. So you can't push them away and you can't go to war with them. So you just have to undermine them, like how France undermined Germany, Germany undermined England, and so on and so forth. But BRICS is worse than the EU, and you all know that. I think I'm not telling you anything new yet, but you do know that Donald Trump is not disillusioned by Russia-Ukraine conflict. Trump is annoyed. Trump is somewhat bewildered that Putin won't take the logical step. And that's because Putin's in an ideological trap. BRICS is pushing this war because this war is undermining the West and testing weapons. India wants an arsenal so it can dominate the region, so that nobody can ever be a threat to them again. This is what frightened children do. And India, like China, are states run by frightened children, acting tough, beating their chest. Zelensky's a frightened child, acting tough, beating his chest. But ultimately, they all crave what Trump has. And that is why, now, Putin doesn't want to be handed victory. He wants to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. He wants the next generation of Russian heroes not to be heroes of a revolution or heroes of the patriotic war, though he will never openly state this, but he wants heroes of the new Russian state, so that people will believe in the new Russian state. But China is trying to return Russia to communism, to undermine the Russian state, to undermine particularly the soft capitalism that Russia wants to envisage, which was the original BRICS. Whereas now BRICS is not soft capitalism, but soft power for China. Now, China has invested trillions, so they're not going to go quietly. But right now, I think Trump's right that Dmitry Medvedev is a failed politician. I definitely think that he's got Xi in one ear and Putin in the other. And this man has never had an original thought in his life. But is it because of Dmitry Medvedev's words, or the fact that Putin has offered no solid evidence that he is going to comply with Trump's request? So Trump's turned his polite request with a 50-day deadline into a stern warning with a 10-day deadline, 8 days to go, a little over, into a, oh, you think I was kidding? And whether or not he refers to nuclear-powered or nuclear-armed, it's an American missile sub. You think it's carrying get-well cards? Now, Medvedev was sidelined by Putin because Medvedev was not popular with the people. Remember, the point of democracy is to convince enough people to give you power. You're never going to convince everybody. All you have to do is convince enough. Now, the reason why we have a Russian-Ukraine war is because of Ukraine. And Barack Obama. And Hillary Clinton. Now, using a shotgun against a combat drone? Yeah, my money's on the drone. Okay, skeet shooting isn't as... skeet shooting. This is propaganda. And look how effective it is. You're defending ruins, bro. You're not an effective soldier. Get a life. Alright, so military aid continues. Ceasefire talks continue. First batch of missiles has been delivered. Putin is basically, like I said, there's a chance that Putin is merely doing the last ditch land grab that you see at the end of most other wars. Now, Zelensky, of course, is saying what Trump wants to hear, but Zelensky, on the other hand, he too is firing drones into Russia to provoke Russia into not accepting a ceasefire deal. So fuck Zelensky and his lies. Now, it's only 2 nuclear submarines, but that's an appropriate response, according to Trump. Now, Ukraine is not a European country, it's an Eastern European country, and as I've said in the past, once the EU breaks up, the Eastern Europeans will become a central power unto itself. Maybe Ukraine and Belarus will be in it. But Western Europe has a toxicity of communism that is totally unacceptable to Eastern Europe. Unless Western Europe gets rid of this toxicity of Labour, the Social Democrats, and the French Socialists, they will eventually crumble under the weight of their own hypocrisy. Ukraine is not protecting Europe from Russian aggression. Ukraine is the aggressor and has been the aggressor since 2014. A fact that most people cannot seem to grasp. But that doesn't mean Russia cannot bring the war to an end on its own terms sooner rather than later and sit down with the Americans and make a deal, which would be far more productive than who gets to sign what document first. Alright, so Sumi's been hit. Russia's fighting in the north. Not much is going on elsewhere, though drones did hit Kharkiv. Kupiansk siege is stalled. Silvesk stalled. Chavez-Yar. Well, Ukraine refuses to, has not accepted the fall of Chavez-Yar, and it's quite possible that they are still on the outskirts of town in this wooded area. You can see on the videos I showed yesterday. But other than that, Chavez-Yar is stalled. This has barely moved. This has barely moved. Though that's only because it's all about bringing up the artillery, missiles and glide bombs. But like I said, that's their target. And you can see they've hit it. And that's the point, isn't it? But as you can see, they're still pushing to in Zelensky. They're still pushing. Bavorsk still pushing at, and they've made no progress in the last week in Novichok, but they're still pushing. But we've seen stalls before, and they are advancing in other areas, filling in this area here. Like I said, I think this is the final week of the land grab, and their dream of grabbing all this, even their dream of grabbing half of this, now seems to be, can we get this? Can we just maybe? I don't know. Where's the natural border though? They've passed it. They could have used this. I don't think they're thinking in one particular way. I think what you've got is a multitude of objectives, and as each gets closer to finishing, others get their turn to advance. But this is a quagmire which clearly has been waiting for this to be resolved, and this has been waiting for this to be resolved. And all of this was put on hold for Kursk, and I think definitely a whole lot of it came from, again, Ukraine doesn't have two brain cells to rub together. And Ukraine, of course, is tearing itself apart by prolonging the war. Now, overall, Russia's kept to its average of liberating one town a day. Now, the casualties in some areas are, as I said, they're now reaching that they've reached 5,000 a week. This is catastrophic, of course, for Ukraine. the majority of deaths are Ukrainians. Everybody knows it. Nobody wants to admit it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be transferring 2 military aid packages in 1 month if it wasn't desperate. Trump reiterates his wish to resolve the conflict and substantiates discussions are going to be between, of course they're going to be between Russia and the US. And, well, apparently Lavrov has reached out to President Trump and insisted on that Kiev attend Istanbul talks. So clearly there is people in the White House that know it's the fact that Ukraine doesn't show up at these talks that's delaying everything. On top of the fact, when Ukraine comes to these talks, they don't even last 40 minutes and they walk away after agreeing to a prisoner exchange or some body exchanges. And then they go home and crow that they've got, that Russia won't show up for peace talks, you know? All right. So we have conversations, which is a positive sign. Russia is prepared to wait and see if Ukraine rejects talks, because that is what they've done in the past. But however, Ukraine is tearing itself apart. They can no longer hide the fact that there are riots. There are not just riots against forced mobilization. There's been riots against the shutting off of power. And they say, the authorities tell us but Russia shut off the power. But it's not Russia. There's no, you know. Protests against Kiev are increasingly violent and sometimes deadly. So this isn't the first time. Witnesses claim they came and took 100 men at night. Yep, that's common. They come in unmarked cars, often stolen from the people. They scream shame at the police, and well, the police are powerless to do anything. Okay. You know why we have had a revolution in Ukraine? Because Barack Obama didn't like the fact that Ukraine was pipelining Russian gas to Europe at a 30% discount. Because American gas companies couldn't sell in Europe because of that. And of course the left are going to say, "Oh, but your boy Trump." He ain't my boy. I criticise Trump when he makes mistakes. But I can see why he wants to use American gas as leverage over Europe and to save the European economy. And ironically, if Russia wasn't selling gas at a discount to Europe in return for peace, Russian economy would be a lot better. So, in a way, he's forcing China, also the fact that Russia has to stop selling gas to China at a discount. It's ruining their economy. It's propping up China, a false economy. A short time ago, which is actually probably the 7th town, although it's not sure. Where is it? Went one too many. Okay. Where's the timestamp? 26 minutes ago, yeah. So make that first town of the week. Because for some reason they ending their military reports on Friday. So already off to a double whammy in the first day. And you can see it's not very big. It's 5 units. So 3 mechanised brigades, so that's 12 tanks, Ukraine brigades are only 500 men, by the way. They're not 1,000. They're supposed to be 1,000 men, but Ukrainian brigades are only 500 men. They've been. Now, Larry Johnson still thinks that Russia holds all the cards. And technically, Russia still has leverage. I think up until Trump starts tariffing India and China. Then, the Russian economy. Well, who do you think China will throw under a bus? Xi. Xi's motto is communism at any cost. Okay? World domination at any cost. Remember, this is a Ukrainian tank. Actually, no, that's a American. It's a Senator Abrams disguised as a Ukrainian tank. Alright, so does it really matter? Because Trump has laid out his cards and he's going to say, we'll see what happens. Which means these 2 submarines, just like the 2 extra B-2s that were launched, it's a clear signal that someone, somewhere, will be looking at a point on the map and going, that's a message from me. Mr. Putin, you better pay attention to this. So, Trump may actually be highlighting something for Russia to pay attention to and go, aha, we better actually end the Ukraine war now. Just like China and Cambodia, China's interference in Cambodia, and the Cambodians going, oh shit, we're the ones that are going to be hung out to dry. So, Mr. Putin, China is going to leave you hung out to dry, just like they did with Iran. Okay, China tried. It's been known since the 90s that China has been undermining Russian position in Iran, even though Iran produces stuff for Russia. You notice that it's just assembly of parts from China. It's only a stepping stone. It is not. And why would China go through Iran? Because the parts aren't coming from China. They're coming from India and other places to companies in Iran. So Chinese companies in Iran are getting parts from India and other countries through through BRICS. So it saves. Well, there are some parts coming overland from China to Russia, but the assembly of big stuff. And why would they do that? Because a lot of the Russian factories can only work for 3 to 6 months of the year because it's too cold. Now, I think, and I hope that it comes to an end, but I think there's going to be a stalemate for a couple of weeks at least before we'll see. Because I think this time we'll see Trump and Speaker Johnson and I forget in the Senate. They will be standing together and they'll announce the sanctions package on Russia. And then Trump will announce that he is writing letters to Xi Jinping and India, and he's going to say they shouldn't be buying Russian oil. We sanction Russian oil. If they continue to buy Russian oil, this ain't right. They're continuing to support the war. Cut it out, or we'll we'll go back to. But since there's already talks and trade talks and deals been made, we'll see what happens. We'll see what Trump has in mind. But there is meetings to come, and Special Envoy Witkoff is to head to Russia today. Should already be there. So we'll find out early tomorrow. Probably be first spoken about on Fox Morning News. They seem to be the lead right now on world breaking news. Outside of... I actually think Putin is going to wait and see what happens before August 8th, before he'll make a speech or he'll announce something. There's always that possibility, folks. Predictions are hard to make because there's one thing that I've noticed about Putin is that he'll always wait till the last minute to make major announcements, and that he'll go through all the possibilities before. So every prediction made about which way he'll go, remember, he's got more information than us. And he's got, don't forget, rogue elements of the Russian government. He's only got 70% of the support. There's still a large chunk of the Russian government which will act against him. Remember, this ain't like the United States where liberals are mostly bark. Okay, liberals bark is louder than loud, but it's mostly bark. In Russia, the opposition is mostly bite. And so far, the opposition has been very, and this is why the US hasn't really spoken out much about the oppression, because most of the opposition in Russia has always been violent opposition rather than political opposition. So we'll see what happens, rather than try and make further predictions about what Putin will do, because I am sure that no matter what I predict, there's always going to be that last minute change that he'll make, simply because it may look illogical to us, but to Putin, he is satisfying the men behind the scenes, the grey old men of the political movement of the new Russia. And remember, this is what he is working for. Okay? He doesn't want communism. He doesn't want the USSR. And he's trying to put Russia in a strong position so that China won't invade them. Whereas I think, and many others think, that no matter what Putin does, as soon as he's gone, China will pounce. Because there's just too many people. You think Keir Starmer is the only weakling in the world who will listen to China? Or Albanese in Australia? Or that whatever weakling comes into power in New Zealand? They all beat their chest and talk about how they're standing up to the United States and we won't blindly follow. Then they buy it, So, we have only a slither of information to go by, and I'm bringing you as much as I can what is relevant, and I'm pretty sure that Trump, the way it will end is Trump gets Putin to sit down, and there'll be a round of talks over the next 3 to 6 months. And if Putin is able to, I think he'll start holding territory rather than taking territory and grinding the Ukrainians down to the point where they no longer want to continue this war. Not by gaining new ground, but letting themselves tear themselves apart politically. when they realise that Zelensky's prolonging the war. But as long as Putin keeps taking territory and not speaking to the Americans about upholding what... See, without a solid agreement to go to the Americans to say, this is the agreement that we want upheld, Trump might actually do that. Trump put forward a very good deal, but it was rejected. It wasn't negotiated. And that, I think, was the mistake. And of course, people are going to go, well, no, it's the invasion. No, bro. Russia held out for 10 years before they invaded. And they were provoked by Zelensky, who promised peace and brought nothing but 6 weeks of misery to the people of the Donbass before Russia invaded. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And please support the channel. You can support the channel on Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree. Head into the website, not sponsored, has all my links. My books, my merch, and of course, my social media and Patreons. So, scan the QR code, check my profile, or Rumble and YouTube, check the links in the description below. Thank you, see you in the next video, and bye for now.